Hi, good evening, everyone. We're going to get started, so please have a seat. Make yourself comfortable. If you want to grab a cookie, coffee, or water real quick before we start, feel free to do that or get up at any time. Welcome to the final community workshop for this 18-month-long land use and transportation study of about 540 acres around the Burbank Bob Hope Airport. My name is Patrick Prescott. I'm in the Community Development Department with the City of Burbank. I want to introduce just quickly our Community Development Director, Joy Forbes, in the back there, and the Executive Director of the Burbank Bob Hope Airport, Dan Fager, who's sitting here, who will be here at least for part of the evening, right? I want to just let you know if you need to use the restroom, it's through the doors behind you and straight out those doors, and it's on the right just past the stairs, okay? The evening will go as we see up here. If you haven't had an opportunity to look at all the boards in the detail that you wish, you'll have an opportunity at the end of the evening where we'll just kind of hang out and be available for questions if anyone has them. The evening will go this way. We're at welcoming remarks right now, and it won't take 10 minutes. So we're going to get started with the overview presentation. What you see on the boards here and in this model is a result of analysis by staff, city staff, airport staff, the consultants that we've contracted with, as well as the community who we've been meeting with for the past 18 months. What you're being presented tonight, we want to hear your response to it, because although it's the final workshop, you have this opportunity to comment, and we can integrate your comments and ideas into whatever it is we ultimately take to our city council for their opinions about as well. So Gaurav, are you going to start? Okay, I'll allow Gaurav to introduce himself.
Thanks, Patrick. My name is Gaurav Srivastav. I'm an urban designer with AECOM, and for the last 18 months or so, we've been working with the airport and the city to come up with and generate a lot of the ideas that you see up in this room today, the boards, the model. If you've attended our past workshops, thank you for coming back. We welcome your continued involvement. If this is the first time you're here, again, thank you for coming. We welcome your insights. And we hope you find this informative and productive. There are really two main reasons why we're having this workshop today. One is to share with you 4 alternatives. And we've packaged these 4 alternatives based on what we've heard from you, our own analysis, as Patrick was describing. And they're organized along themes of land use, which I will be talking about, and transportation that Tyler will be talking about, and he's going to follow my presentation. Number 2, and more importantly, is we really want to hear what you have to say. And as you think about how you want to provide us comments, I think what will help our task and make this meeting really productive and successful for us is if you tell us what you agree with in what you hear and see today, if you tell us what you don't agree with, I think that's more important. And thirdly, tell us if we're missing out on something entirely, if there was something that you were expecting to hear today that you did not hear. And I think along those 3 themes, we'll get a really fleshed out understanding of what you all think about the alternatives and ideas that we're sharing with you today. So let's just first remind ourselves about what it is that we've been studying for the last 18 months. Our study area from the land use perspective is 540 acres of industrial land that is adjacent to Bob Hope Airport. It's primarily on the east and the south side, and it lies entirely within the city of Burbank. Bob Hope Airport is clearly the defining feature of our study area, and it's a really interesting small-scale airport. It's the only airport in Southern California that has rail access. It is one of 2 airports in the country that has Amtrak access. And with the recent opening of the Regional Intermodal Transportation Center, its opportunities to connect have become even much bigger and better. The study area historically was associated with the aerospace industry. It is still zoned all in industrial, or primarily industrial. Lockheed was the anchor tenant for decades. It left in 1990s. There are still significant aerospace users that continue to occupy or have business activities in the study area. But in the last 10 years, the study area has observed a fairly dramatic shift in employment trends. There are about 10,000 employees currently in these 540 acres that we're looking at. Industrial jobs have more or less remained stable. 10 years ago, there were about 2,500 of them. Today, there are still 2,500 of them. What has really increased dramatically are infotech and media-related jobs, to a point today where they constitute the majority of jobs in the study area. So while we still consider this area industrial, the underlying industries are really not industrial. They're more related to infotechnology and media. And I'll come back and talk a little bit about why we've seen this dramatic shift happen in employment and why the Bob Hope Airport area is so unique in that shift. The last point that I want to touch on this slide is the utilization of land. The diagram on the bottom left highlights in gray all the land parcels that are either vacant or have surface lots or are just underutilized. And our analysis shows that about 50% of that 540 acres is just underutilized. So there is a significant opportunity to rethink and reinvent how land can be used in our study area. As Patrick earlier said, this is our third and final workshop. We've had two previous workshops, one in June of last year and one in March earlier this year. And there are a few themes that have emerged from our conversations with you, and I'll touch on a few of them. I think the first one is this recognition that the airport is clearly an asset, that it has helped the local economy, not just of the Valley of Burbank, but of the immediate study area, the 540 acres that we're looking at. Another theme that emerged very clearly was that Burbank is special, that things that may be acceptable in other places, even in the region, are not necessarily so in Burbank, and we recognize that and value that. We've had discussions on the adjoining neighborhoods and this very strong desire to preserve the character of residential neighborhoods around the study area. And upfront, I just want to say that all our analysis and the study area that we're looking at is all industrial. So nothing that we're proposing directly impacts the residential neighborhoods or the residential populations that are adjacent to the study area. A few more points. There's this need, I think, that the image of the area needs to be upgraded. So the quality of the streets, the quality of the public realm, the kinds of amenities residents and workers have access to, that needs upgrading. And finally, this notion that industrial land uses and industrial zoning often preclude amenities that the workers and residents of the area may look for and desire, and that industrial land use may need more flexibility in the future. All right, then, coming back to why and how the employment has shifted so dramatically in the study area. And I want to start off this discussion with introducing the idea of transit-oriented development. And when I say introducing the idea of transit-oriented development, it's not a new phenomenon. It has a new name, but it's really a phenomenon that has gone back 150 years. And the underlying thesis is that transit access, when available, adds value to parcels of land that are within a walking distance of a station. So private developers capture that value by clustering jobs and homes around that. And in return, the transit system gets ridership. So that's what makes the system work. Typically, transit-oriented development has been associated with light rail or bus rapid transit. And that when we talk of TOD, which is what us practitioners refer to as transit-oriented development, it's usually bus rapid transit and light rail. What we've learned through our analysis here in the Bob Hope Airport area, that Bob Hope Airport Terminal is acting much like a transit station. And the most striking example of that new thinking is the presence of Yahoo's Southern California office across the street from the terminal. And if you go to Yahoo Burbank's recruiting website, they start off their description of the office by saying that it is within a 10-minute walk of Bob Hope Airport Terminal. And that's how a train station describes itself and its relationship to the city. Usually airports are considered to have a negative impact on adjoining lands. But in the case of Bob Hope Airport, that is definitely not the case. Users, businesses want to co-locate next to the airport because in Yahoo's case, it takes 50 minutes to fly to San Jose to their head office. And they value the ease of access that the airport provides them. And it's not just Yahoo. The whole cluster around Yahoo, which is Media Studios North, has tech users, clean tech users that value being located in Southern California, but also value the ease of access that they have through the airport to the Bay Area. Recognizing that the airport has provided us an expanded understanding of transit-oriented development, at our last workshop, we introduced some land use ideas that we got feedback from you, and I'll just quickly recap what it is that we discussed. First was the idea of synergy districts. The airport synergy district are parcels of land that are within a 10-minute walk of the airport terminal. And the kinds of uses that one would expect to see within that area is the uses that happen at Media Studios North. So Class A office space, very high quality of interiors, of public spaces, of sidewalks, streets. And that experiment has already been conducted, and we know it's successful, as Media Studio North shows us. The other synergy district is the rail synergy district, and that's a more traditional transit-oriented development. You cluster jobs and homes around a train station, and that's how the transit system finds success, and that's how private property owners find success. We also discussed two land use categories that were within the umbrella of industrial uses. Industrial uses are clearly the majority, the predominant use in the study area, and there is a clear need to protect and preserve industrial uses that want to continue to remain here. And there are several stable industries, long-standing, that are around the study area. We also recognize that there are often industrial parcels that are either vacant or underutilized because they are unable to provide the kinds of spaces that new industrial types need. So we end up with situations where they're just underutilized. To address that vacancy and underutilization, we introduced the idea of a flex district, which really allows light industrial, hotel, retail, creative office, and residential in some cases to coexist. And it is really the market demand that will determine where the balance of those uses lies. And when we go through the alternatives, I'll show you how we're proposing to cluster the flex use districts. Again, flex use districts are not the norm. There are some places in Southern California that have explored them successfully. The Arts District in downtown Los Angeles, for example, Hayden Tract in Culver City. So old industrial building stock, outdated, needs new life, and the city figures out a way to provide that new life. We also discussed the idea of special places, and what this really means is places of arrival or places of heavier pedestrian traffic. And the diagram on the top just highlights what we think are the special places in our study area, and they're associated with the existing train station on the south side on the Ventura line, the proposed new train station on the north side on San Fernando that's on the Antelope Valley line, and then a arrival experience associated with the air terminal. And clearly, Hollywood Way would belong in that genre of experiences because everyone who visits the study area at some point has to get onto Hollywood Way. And the image that you see on the bottom is a sketch interpretation of how Hollywood Way could be improved. It's for those of you who've driven and walked down the street, it's a sterile environment. It's next to a runway. It pretty much looks like a runway. There are the images, the ideas that we could include are introduce a median with vegetation, make sure that the buildings along the street have a street facade, have main entrances, so it behaves and feels like a real street. We also identified corridors of access, and these really are streets that we think residents, workers, and visitors would use to access destinations in the study area, including the terminal. And there are four key ones. There's Hollywood Way, clearly, which needs to belong in this category, and then there are three east-west streets, and I'll start with the one at the bottom, which is Empire Avenue. Empire Avenue currently has improvements ongoing at the interchange with the 5 freeway, and it is expected that Empire Avenue will provide most of the freeway traffic on and off to the study area. The street on the top is Winona Avenue. If the air terminal relocates to the northern parcel on B6, it is likely that Winona Avenue will provide clear, straight-shot access to the new terminal. It is a better arrangement than the current Thornton Avenue arrangement, because Thornton Avenue has residential uses along its side, so there's a conflict of through traffic, airport traffic and residential. Winona Avenue will not have that, because it's only industrial uses, business uses on both sides. And this image shows how Thornton could be improved with new street trees, new crosswalks, new really pedestrian amenities to emphasize the fact that this is more a residential street and less a street to provide access to the businesses and the air terminal. All right, so now we're in the 4 land use alternatives, and I'll go through them slowly one by one, because really your input on these 4 alternatives is what we're seeking today. And I'll start with alternative 1. I think the best way to describe it is it's closest to the existing conditions. It's closest to status quo. The area that you see up in purple on the top is industrial uses, and the majority of land area in this alternative preserves those industrial uses. So about 60% remains industrial. The area in red that is labeled as the Airport Synergy District more or less coincides with how Media Studios North and the Marriott Hotel have already evolved. So that's already reflecting an organic trend that has happened, that is the Airport Synergy District. The areas in light blue are airport owned and controlled, and they provide operational needs for the airport. The area in orange on the south that is labeled the Rail TOD District, that's a new district for this land use alternative, and that's one that proposes to cluster jobs and homes within a 10-minute walk of the South Station, the station that's on the way to Ventura. Alternative 2, sorry, there's one important piece in the last alternative that I didn't call out. The alternative 1 assumes that the existing air terminal remains at its current location. And that's the only one of the 4 alternatives that we'll talk about today that assumes that. The other 3, starting with alternative 2, assume that the air terminal is now relocated onto B6 to the north. So alternative 2 is the first alternative where we throw out the idea of a flex use district. And it's arranged in green, that's the footprint you see, along Hollywood Way. And the everything else is industrial. So this alternative, similar to alternative 1, tries to preserve as much industrial as it can, but also then provide the flexibility along Hollywood Way, which is a main corridor, for new uses and amenities to be co-located. Alternative 3 provides the greatest diversity of uses. In fact, all 4 land use categories that we've discussed find themselves in alternative 3. It again assumes the terminal is relocated to the northern parcel. Associated with that relocated terminal is a new airport synergy district, and it sits over B6 and the opportunity parcel. And just FYI, that's a separate planning process, environmental process that the airport and city are going through currently, but it meshes well with an idea that also happens to exist in this plan. The industrial uses, which is the purple island north of San Fernando, are located at in that area because it has direct freeway access. So it's easy to get on and off the 5 freeway, and that's important for industrial uses. There's a rail synergy district associated with the southern station on Empire Avenue, and then a flex district that is beyond the 10-minute walk of both the air terminal and the existing train station and the proposed train station. And that would allow, like I previously said, industrial uses to coexist with other uses depending on market demand. Then the fourth and final alternative is is the one that represents the greatest shift from status quo. And it's pretty clear from the diagram that the areas in red, which is the airport synergy district, has the maximum footprint in the alternative 4. And this is based on the assumption that the relocated air terminal will continue to play a role in generating employment in the local economy, but over time that role will become bigger and bigger. So it represents clearly a more intense scenario. The industrial uses, again, are preserved on the north of San Fernando, and that's true for all our four alternatives. There is always some attempt to preserve existing industrial uses. And there's a rail synergy district south of the Empire Avenue rail tracks. All right, so we took this exercise one step further, and we undertook some urban design explorations to try and visualize and illustrate what impact these land use policies would have over a 20 to 30 year period. So I just want to be very clear up front that the designs that you see here on the model, on the boards, and on the slides that are going to follow are just hypothetical explorations. These are not proposals. We do not control the land, but they are meant to indicate the urban environment one can expect to see 20 to 30 years down the road if the city decides to pursue the air synergy district or the rail synergy district. And there are 4 clear opportunities that we see. And I'll start with the one on the south. So the one that's labeled Rail TOD Synergy Opportunity, that's associated with the existing Metrolink station to Ventura, and it's on the parcel that is currently occupied by Fry's Electronics. We're not proposing to get rid of Fry's. It's clearly a retail landmark for the entire valley. But we've studied a scenario where we could introduce new uses replacing the vast extent of surface parking that's around Fry's. Because really surface parking is not the best use when it's right across the street from a train station. The red boundary that's just north of it, which is Airport Synergy Opportunity number 1, is associated with the existing Marriott Hotel. And again, the Marriott Hotel parcel has a lot of surface parking along Thornton. And given its current condition where the terminal is currently located, it's probably the best located parcel from an air synergy standpoint. That it's right across the street from the terminal. It's the shortest walk to get to that parcel. And one could argue that what Media Studios North has done further to the south could be done and more on that parcel. And we'll show you some design studies on how that may work. 2 blocks of Ontario are really not, we don't consider them new development opportunities, but it's really to illustrate a model for how aging industrial buildings can be rehabbed and reused. And then the 4th opportunity is on the east side of Hollywood Way, across the street from the opportunity parcel, and that's an air synergy urban design exploration, and that assumes that the air terminal is located to the north, and the benefits of that relocation are going to flow not just to the opportunity parcel on the west side of Hollywood Way, but will cross the street and actually have impacts on land on the other side of the street. And just for your reference, that's the parcel that currently has Star's cable office on it. So it's off to Larry. So these images are for the Fry's parcel. What we're proposing hypothetically is new office and residential, because this presents the best opportunity to cluster, at least in our study area, to cluster jobs and homes adjacent to transit. We have retained Fry's, so it becomes a mixed-use district. There's also an idea to connect or to extend the proposed pedestrian bridge from Ritzy to the Metrolink station and to bring it across the street to the south side and have the arrival experience of that train station on the south side of the street and on the Fry's parcel. So there is a heavy emphasis on the quality of the public realm and the experience of visitors, residents, hotel users, if there is a hotel. The images on this slide illustrate the office opportunities that exist adjacent to Marriott Hotel. the public realm or the open spaces that are as depicted emphasize the connection or how easy it is to get from this parcel to the terminal. So one could imagine other high-tech users from Silicon Valley valuing this parcel, who want to locate to Southern California, valuing this parcel because of that quick and easy connection. These are images that don't show any new development. So this is the Flex opportunity, and this is along 2 blocks of Ontario from San Fernando down to Thornton. And what these images, these sketches show are existing industrial buildings that have probably been around for 50, 60 years. One of them is vacant. The one on the bottom is definitely vacant. And how they could be rehabbed and reinvented with new uses. So there's a microbrewery in an aging warehouse and that's a model that has been very successfully used in other industrial districts in Southern California. And there's no reason why it could not happen here. That's an old Quonset hut that is still currently used, but it's got inherent character. It's an old building and could someday transform itself into a restaurant. And there are very proximate examples of how this has been successful. So if you're familiar with Golden Road Brewery in Atwater, they took an aging industrial shed, and first they programmed it just to be a brewery. And then they realized the value of actually getting visitors to that place. So now there is a pub, and it's very successful. How we think this will help the study area is that it allows a diversity of experiences. These are experiences that are not currently available to residents or workers in the study area, because the only place you can have lunch are the fast food restaurants that are currently along Hollywood Way, or in the cafeterias in this very upscale corporate environment. So introducing something like this provides a diversity of uses, not just for residents, but also workers who frequent this place. And then finally, this is an illustration of what is possible on the parcel that's across the street from the Opportunity parcel, where the Stars office building currently is. So similar to Fry's, in this situation too, we retain that existing building, and we introduce new structured parking to take care of all that surface parking that's currently around it. And to replace that surface parking, a new Class A office space that would want users, that would attract users who want to be close to the terminal. The sketch on the bottom shows what a dramatic impact that may have on Hollywood Way, which is not a street I think any of us would portray as something city should aspire to currently. It's clearly in need of attention and more energy. And I think an opportunity like this will help, I think, Hollywood Way become something better. That concludes my quick overview. We're here for the rest of for another hour at least, so we're happy to answer questions. Before I hand off to Tyler, I just want to quickly summarize these 4 slides again. Again, these were hypothetical explorations. None of this is a proposal, so none of this is going to happen anytime soon or if ever. But these are just examples of what one could expect to see if these policies were pursued. Tyler, you're up.
Hi, my name is Lynn Kronzik, and I'm just wondering, I haven't heard anything about conference facilities spaces, and maybe it's because of the different nature of businesses currently located there, like the technology firms, and maybe they don't need conferences or conference facilities, but that hasn't been really addressed. And I wonder what has been going on in the interim. I've seen some changes on Hollywood Way that frankly don't please me. And there was I thought it was beautiful. Other people would think differently. A Deco automotive center, probably from the 30s or 40s, that was torn down. Now there's a trucking space nearby. I don't know if it's the same exact space, but I'm wondering in the interim. So there are 2 questions. One deals with conference space, and the other deals with who's been minding the store as the planning goes on. Thank you.
All right, I'll address your first question regarding conference spaces. All right, so at the outset, I think any of the 3 design explorations that we shared with you today could accommodate a conference facility. We've not illustrated it to do so, but any of them could, because they're all located well enough or close enough to either the terminal or to the rail transit to allow something like that to happen. What we also haven't discussed today is what has been programmed for the opportunity parcel on the west side of Hollywood Way. And that's maybe something Patrick can address, but from what I understand, there are it is programmed to provide exactly those kind of uses that you're talking about. So hotel, conference, and given that it's the parcel that's most proximate to the new terminal location, that's probably the best place to locate those uses.
And then your second question was related to new uses in the area that you've seen recently. So anything you've seen built in that area along Hollywood Way or in the rest of the study area in the last year or two, it's all consistent with the zoning that's in place now. So there's no, yeah, so if it complies with zoning, we generally approve it. So one of the things that the result of this study will be is the development, we hope, of a specific plan for this area, which is zoning specific to just the study area that you see laid out here, that will provide some new development standards to get high quality development and incorporate a lot of the things that Gaurav has mentioned this evening.
Good evening. David Cantu. I actually live right in this area of the development. My family also has a business along San Fernando, right where the new airport terminal is being proposed. I have to agree with the previous speaker. As a business owner, manager, and a resident, I look at to see what the needs are in Burbank, what residents are looking, and I will agree with previous speaker here that Burbank doesn't have enough convention centers for like community events and stuff, and I know like the hotel convention centers, they're way too expensive, but for some of our local community events, we need to have some sort of more affordable convention centers. But also I was just curious because in the area where my business is at, Ontario Street is pretty much becoming a ghost town right now. Most of those industrial buildings are pretty much all of them are empty. And I remember that back in the 80s and 90s, that used to be a thriving business area. And now it's become a ghost town since the economy had crashed. So with all these future proposals, even if you guys change how the zoning and everything is, how is it guaranteed that if we have all these new buildings and new office buildings being built around the new airport terminal, how are we going to guarantee that a lot of great businesses are even going to come to Burbank and help bring more jobs to the city?
All right. So regarding your first point, I think we've heard that comment twice. We'll definitely find a place in our final recommendations. And I think we've heard that need expressed previously, so it's not surprising. Regarding your second question on building vacancies, and especially along Ontario, I think that one of the reasons why we proposed this flex-use district centered along Ontario was to address exactly that issue, that there are buildings and parcels that saw better days and are currently either vacant or underutilized or just not marginal. And the ability of a property owner to introduce uses that he or she is currently denied will help address that in the long run. And I think the city has the ability to shape and program and attract uses and amenities that it thinks will complement what's available in the study area. And it's fortunately for the city, it's not doing this as an experiment. It's not the first one to have realized that this problem exists, and it will not be the first one to propose a solution. And we have good examples locally and across the country how aging industrial districts need to be reinvented and what the strategies are to allow that reinvention to happen. And it's in the context of our 540 acres, I think it's interesting because there is this diversity of needs and urban experiences represented at one extreme by Class A high-tech office space, and at the other end by just low-intensity, small-scale, fine-grained industrial uses that, if they were injected with even one single amenity, would provide value not just to the property but to workers and who are around that area, provide them an amenity. So I don't know whether it addresses your problem, but I think our strategy for dealing through the flex-use district is meant to address the concern that you raised.
So our current zoning, there are about 10,000 employees in this study area, but our current zoning prohibits things that many employees can use during the day. Everything from shoe repair, dry cleaners, convenience markets, certain other uses that someone who works in an area would love to be able to walk to or at least head to on their way home from work. And that's just a really simple way to introduce new uses. It's just to change the zoning to allow some of these different uses in the area. Yep.
Thank you. I think my questions I'll hold off on because they're more transit-oriented, but just a request, if it's possible, since you have our emails, could this presentation be sent out to us?
This will be posted probably tomorrow on the linkBURBANK website, linkburbank.com. It's what you see, the words there, linkburbank.com. These presentations, the boards you see, and all of our previous presentations and boards from the other workshops are also available on that page. There's about 4 or 5 tabs along the top. You just click on resources and you'll find that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes. To Lynn, and then back there.
It's just a suggestion to add to what Cantu said, that I saw in some of the previous diagrams suggesting adaptive reuse, and I would strongly echo that. Rather than tearing down buildings that look seedy because they haven't been used for 5 years, that we do something creative with those buildings, but that maintains the character, their character. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Richard Carney. The California High-Speed Train Project recently hosted a public outreach meeting in Burbank, at which they presented a proposal which included a high-speed rail station adjacent to Bob Hope Airport. I guess the question is whether any of your proposed land use alternatives have taken that into consideration. And I was perhaps a little surprised that it wasn't referenced in your earlier presentation.
So our project team is well aware of the high-speed rail station, and we're well aware of the one diagram that they've released that shows it located somewhere at San Fernando and Winona, somewhere in that vicinity. What we're also aware of is that beyond that diagram, there's nothing that's publicly available. So how we've addressed it from a land use standpoint is the impact that high-speed rail will have on land that's adjacent to it is likely to be in the similar order of magnitude that the air terminal currently has impact. The one alternative that allows both high-speed rail and the air terminal to have their benefits flow to the surrounding land is alternative 4. The reason we've not on a diagram mapped out where the station is because no one in this room or anywhere else knows where that is. And it is, I think, premature on our part to suggest that to high-speed rail. From our understanding of their timing, their revised notice of preparation is expected sometime in the next couple of months, maybe next month, right? And early next year there'll be a draft EIR on the street. I think at that point, prior to the city commencing on the next phase of this effort, which is a specific plan, the city will have a much better understanding on how to address that issue. But I think to reassure yourselves, we understand what the impacts of high-speed rail will be, but we're just unable to pinpoint and place that on a diagram. So when we have that information, there'll be an alternative that clearly addresses that.
Okay. Tyler, you want to present the transportation portion here?
I guess just briefly to add to that also, alternative 4 for transportation is also, I think, where we're starting to look at what the impacts would likely be with a high-speed rail station there. And that's where we're starting to talk about maybe we need a subway extension up to that area to handle those kind of passenger loads. So yeah, Gaura's right, it's tough to pinpoint yet what exactly that is. So we're kind of trying to generally accommodate it with our alternatives and then focus down more on it when we get more detail to work with. I'm going to move this up. All right, well, hello, I'm Tyler Bonstead with STV, and we are leading the transportation part of this study. And basically, this side of the room focuses on the transportation issues. I'm just going to walk you through some of the key ones that we looked at as part of this study. So just starting with what the project goals are, I think I've covered this at the other meetings too, but I just want to reiterate that. We're looking for the airport to move beyond being an air hub to a transportation hub for the entire San Fernando Valley area. That's one of our main goals, and we cast a bit of a wider net than the 500-acre study area that the land use study is looking at, more out to the immediate Burbank area and then even out to regional connections a bit further out, which you can see pointed out in this picture, along the Metrolink lines to the rest of the region, over to Burbank, Glendale, and Pasadena, down to North Hollywood, and then also some improvements in the airport area itself for the roadway system, for bikes and pedestrians, for the terminal connection to transit, and also for the connection between buses and trains. So there's 7 main areas that we're looking at, which I just described there, and which are shown in the 7 different colors basically on this board, and I'll go through each one of them. We're looking, similar to the land use study, at 4 different options for each one of those key areas that we're looking at, which generally go from kind of less expensive, more near-term alternatives to more expensive, further out alternatives. And so for each one of them, I'll kind of walk you through that. What we have been showing before also is, I think we have a pretty good idea of what these alternatives are that we've shown at the last meeting. What we really want to focus on today is how they perform, what their cost and their ridership and issues like that are. So I'll be getting into a little bit more detail. One thing I want to note first is that actually there's been quite a bit of work done in the near term in the airport area on transportation issues already. There's 4 things I'd like to point out, the first of which is the Regional Intermodal Transportation Center, also known as RITC, which just had its grand opening a few weeks ago, and which brings a consolidated rental car facility as well as improved bus and train connections to the area just south of the airport terminal today. What we show up here is the rendering, the groundbreaking, the grand opening, and kind of how it is today in relation to the airport terminal. And there is, as part of that, a moving walkway which connects the air terminal to the RITC and train station area. So that's something that has already opened. Another piece of it is improvements at the existing train station on the Ventura County line. So what you can see up here on the top 2 photos on the right there is improvements to the parking lot that were just installed recently by the state of California. And then what's on the bottom there is 2 renderings of a new pedestrian bridge, which now has funding and will be starting design soon and hopefully be implemented in the next few years. So that will basically connect into that elevated walkway, which already goes from the airport terminal to the RITC, and allow you to go the rest of the way from there across the street, across the railroad tracks, and down to the platform. So that'll be a great new connection to make that have an easier trip from the train station to the airport terminal. A third exciting project is a new Metrolink station on the north side of the airport. So that's for the Antelope Valley line, which runs between downtown LA, Santa Clarita, Palmdale, Lancaster. That is along San Fernando Road at Hollywood Way, and it will be starting construction very soon and opening early next year. And so that will provide additional options for people riding the train to the airport area, either to go to the airport, to the jobs in the airport, and other things in that area. And then a final piece is mitigation measures that are part of the I-5 construction project. So there have been some recent items moving, especially through the Metro Board, to provide mitigation during construction. And some of the things that are included as part of that package include improving Metrolink access to the airport, improving the hours of operation for Burbank Bus, and also looking at a new bus service, which I'm going to talk about a little bit detail later, between the airport, Burbank, Glendale, and Pasadena. So those are all items that are part of the transportation fabric today, and that we're looking to build upon as part of this project. So the first key area we looked at was roadways in the study area. And as you're aware, there's lots of existing roads in the freeway in the area, and there's a couple projects already in the works. So I already talked about the I-5 project, which is adding a carpool lane and other improvements to the freeway. There's also the Empire Avenue grade separation and interchange, which will connect Empire Avenue directly to Interstate 5. I think the off-ramp was recently closed in that area to accommodate that kind of construction. And will also elevate the train tracks over Empire Avenue and also over Buena Vista Street and come back down to grade at Hollywood Way. So that'll really be a great new separation of train and road service, and then also provide a new southern access into the airport along Empire Avenue, as opposed to today when you might have people coming in along Thornton, like Gaurav talked about earlier, or along Hollywood Way. Another interesting project on the west side of the airport, which is a little bit at earlier stages, is grade separating Clybourne Avenue, which is a track kind of between Van Owen and Empire Avenue there on the west side of the terminal. So that's something in the works, hopefully. And then also improvements at San Fernando Boulevard and Burbank Boulevard, a little bit outside of the study area. One additional roadway improvement we're looking at as part of this project as alternatives 3 and 4 is improving Winona Avenue and actually extending it under the railroad tracks where there's space for it now as part of the design, and allowing for a more direct access between the freeway and a potential replacement terminal up on the northeastern quadrant of the airport there. So that's something that we included in several of our alternatives. But otherwise, we didn't include a huge number of roadway improvements. We're mainly focused on just ensuring that we continue to have roadway access in the area and focusing maybe a bit more on transit connections also. So just to give an idea of how these roadways perform, what we highlight here is basically just roads that have a decreased level of service as part of these different alternatives. And what you can see it mainly focuses on is Winona Avenue, as maybe that becomes more of a direct access into the airport. And also once we get towards alternative 4 and some of the more intense land uses, some effects also possibly on Hollywood Way and Empire Avenue. But for the most part, the roadway improvements and impacts are fairly limited as part of these improvements here. Next up, what I'd like to talk about is the connection between the airport, downtown Burbank, Glendale, and Pasadena. There's not a single line that you can do that with today. You usually have to transfer between a bus or two. And so we really looked at 4 options to do that. The first one is an on-demand shuttle, similar to the Super Shuttle service that currently connects the airport to the North Hollywood station, but to have that running over to the Pasadena area instead. So what you're going to see up here for a lot of these is some of the key metrics. What we're looking at roughly at rush hour is around a 50-minute travel time from Pasadena to the airport area. Capital cost mainly, which involves buying these shuttles, of around $500,000, and an operating cost of a couple $1 million a year. What you see that yields is a ridership of around 440 people per day, which is fairly low, and a cost per rider of around $17. What we then look at as the next level up from that is having a regular bus service running every 30 minutes in that same corridor. And what you see there is it's roughly the same travel time, a bit of a higher capital cost, a little bit of a lower operating cost actually, depending on how those headways work out. And what you see is you have ridership roughly double when you put in a fixed route service like that, and a bit of a better cost per rider. Alternative 3, what we basically do is we continue that bus service out to Pasadena, but we add in some improvements on the freeway to allow it to more easily enter and exit the carpool lane that runs in the center of the freeway. Those improvements are pretty costly, in the hundreds of millions of dollars range. And what you see is that the ridership does go up a bit more, from 880 to 1,400, but not a huge bump. So that cost per rider is actually quite a bit higher. And it may say that at least to start, you might want to focus on using the existing infrastructure as opposed to building new infrastructure here. And then once you have that ridership base, maybe think about improving it past that. And then the final thing we're looking at, the high cost one, would actually be a light rail line connecting the Gold Line in Pasadena to the airport area through Glendale. You can see it has a lower travel time there. You're getting down to the 30-minute range during rush hour, but it has a very, very high capital cost. Over $3 billion is what we're estimating, as well as a high operating cost too, close to $30 million. But the ridership, as you can see, is very big. 25,000 riders a day is what we're estimating. And the cost per rider is actually less than some of the bus options there. So it's an interesting long-term opportunity for the corridor there. Pretty high ridership, but also a very high cost to get through that very densely populated corridor in certain areas there. Moving on to North Hollywood. So what you have there is a big transit hub right now with the Metro Red Line subway and the Metro Orange Line busway coming into the area. Like I said, there's already an existing Super Shuttle service that connects that, and there's also actually a Burbank bus line that connects to North Hollywood, but during rush hour only. So what we're showing on the left there, the yellow buses are the ones that run today. And so what we're proposing as part of the first alternative is adding in new service to fill in those gaps all day so that you'd know if you take the Red Line to North Hollywood that you'd have a bus there pretty quickly to take you the rest of the way up to the airport. See, it's around a 20-minute travel time, assuming that is your connection for that alternative. Not a big capital cost really at all because you already have buses that run there. You'd just be running them during the the midday period where they don't run today. And additional operating costs and respectable ridership there. Almost 1,000 people by putting that type of line in for about a $3 cost per rider, which is pretty low. The second alternative, what we're looking at, is extending the Orange Line actually to the airport. In this case, we're not talking about having a dedicated busway like you might be familiar with for the Orange Line through the rest of the San Fernando Valley. It would basically run in the existing street lanes. But what it would allow is, say, for somebody coming from the west part of the valley to not have to transfer, just get on the bus, stay out by Warner Center, and take it directly to the airport area. What we show there is that you get a better travel time. We're typically expecting to be running up Lancashire Boulevard and then over on Van Owen, and then have additional capital costs there also to buy some additional buses and to put in some new bus stations in that area and operating costs, but you see a gigantic bump in ridership. We're showing something like 9,000 riders a day, which is a great number and probably approaching the capacity of the Orange Line, frankly, to be able to accommodate that many people. But also an amazing cost per rider of $1. So it's a very, as far as our modeling shows, cost-effective option. But like I said, it might even be approaching the limits of what a bus can actually accommodate with 8-minute headways. The third option here is actually to run those Orange Line buses, but to give them their own lane in the street. We're not talking about a separate busway like you have for the Orange Line now, but basically to carve out part of the road for them to go in. You see that even increases ridership even more to around 12,000 riders a day. Some additional capital and operating costs for that, but once again, you have a very good cost per rider. And the final option we're looking at is to extend the Red Line, the subway, basically up the entire way to the airport, stopping on the south side of the airport, kind of where the transit center is today, and then also ending up in the north where there may be a high-speed rail station going in that general area there. Also very costly along the lines of the Gold Line extension. We're showing somewhere in the $2 to $3 billion range, and with a pretty high operating cost. And the ridership, at least with how we model it right now, pretty close to where the Orange Line is, and a lot higher cost per rider. So it's definitely something that has some good merits far in the future, but it might also kind of say that maybe you want to start with bus service, and once you have that service really going well, especially if it's nearing capacity, then think about rail service as an extension, especially if you have a high-speed rail station in the area there. So those are the four options we're looking at for North Hollywood and kind of the effectiveness of those. Another thing that we see in the airport area for the bus and rail connections is they're scattered, really a lot of them around the area. So what we want to do as part of the study is to bring them together, to bring the bus and the rail connections into a couple hubs, basically, in the airport area. So what we're showing up here is a rendering. This today is on San Fernando Road, looking south in the Hollywood Way area along the railroad tracks there. And what's going to be going in early next year is a new train station, which is shown on the right there, the general design for the canopy and for the bus stop and where people will be able to go. One thing that's interesting is that in the future, there's likely going to be a second track through the area. So you'd need to think about a second platform on the other side of the tracks. And then also, it's a bit hard to see in the background there, but maybe a pedestrian bridge going up and over to provide that kind of connectivity across the railroad tracks. So that's kind of a rendering of how that could look like ultimately with really a great transit hub on the north side of the airport area there in the Hollywood Way, San Fernando Road area. On the south side, so on the south side of the airport, what you can see on the upper left picture there is the current recently opened Regional Intermodal Transportation Center. And this is looking at the existing station on the south side of the airport that you have Metrolink and Amtrak trains stop at. What we show on the right there is the new pedestrian bridge that would be going in the near future. And also a couple other items, which are signs, changeable electronic signs on the platform, which gives you an idea of when flights are taking off. Because if you have people going to the airport, you want to give them as good of an idea as possible of the connections they're making. Gaurav talked about airlines as transit also, and we really want to provide a good train to airplane connection there. And so that's the kind of information we could show on the platform area. And conversely, at the terminal, here's the existing terminal here, and what we show on the right there is adding train and bus information at the terminal. So when you're getting off the plane and maybe now you think I have to take a taxi or I have to get picked up, what it shows you there is actually there's a train going by heading to downtown LA in 15 minutes. So if you just go up over this walkway here, you can get on that train and get to where you're going if you're heading, say, there or say up to Santa Clarita or any destination, excuse me, that the different train and bus lines go to. So one of the main things we're looking at here is bringing bus and train service together in these north and south hubs in the airport area, and then providing a lot of information so people realize the convenience of transit service for people coming to and from the airport, for employees in the area of the airport, or even of other development around the airport too. And speaking of Metrolink service, what we're looking at in Alternative 5 is how we can focus transit schedules to serve airport needs. I've talked about it at some of the previous meetings, but there's really gaps in the schedule right now. Gaps in the schedule right now for when a train is going to come that often you might have to wait several hours for a Metrolink train to come by at certain times of the day. Here it kind of shows throughout the day and when some of those gaps are. So we're looking at a couple different alternatives. One of them is improving Metro bus service in the area. There are a lot of Metro bus lines that run by. What we show there actually is that filling in some of the early and late evening hours and also improving the headways on some of the lines can have a pretty good effect. We show a 17% additional ridership on some of those Metro lines for a fairly low additional cost. But it's a tough market just because it's more for shorter distance trips. So if we're looking at longer distance regional trips, you probably have to look at trains or things like that. And so that's what these next two look at here. And what you can see is we have one option where we're basically just filling in those gaps in Metrolink service. What we want to basically try to have is a train coming by every hour. And when you do that, we have good additional ridership, 3% over what it is today, and some additional operating costs and quite a bit of additional capacity also. And it provides you that reliability that you know you have, that you don't just have a couple trains you have to catch, but there's one coming by every hour at a minimum. Alternative 4 is looking at really getting the Metrolink frequency dialed up even more than that, to say a train every half hour or 20 minutes. And what we showed is that while that did bump up ridership a certain amount, 6% compared to 3%, it has a very high capital cost to be able to accommodate that many trains in the corridor. And you can see the cost per rider is quite a bit more than Alternative 2 and 3 when we're just adding some limited trains. Once again, I think this kind of tells a story that a train every half hour might be a bit too much at this time, but a train every hour is more a type of reliability we're looking for. Once you can build that service, then you might want to think about getting even more trains than that. But you kind of see that it tails off a bit as you really add maybe too many trains in the corridor for certain times like that. So alternatives 1 through 3 show some good results for some fairly limited additional operating costs in the corridor area there. Item 6 is about connecting the terminal to the surrounding transit service. What you see right now is you have the train, for example, the train station on the south side of the airport, and you do have to walk a bit to get to the terminal. Or also, if you get off the bus on Hollywood Way, you do have a bit of a hike to get to the terminal. So how can we better improve those services to connect you from transit to the terminal area? Really what we're looking at in the first 3 alternatives is just existing and improved shuttle bus service in the airport area. We show that in those, and we also show in the maps is where those lines would go. A thing to note is that if you move the terminal and put a replacement terminal on the north side of the airport, you would have to provide shuttle service to connect to some of the amenities on the south side of the airport there. And you could actually have some efficiencies by consolidating some of those lines. But when we'd then be looking at for the final alternative, for Alternative D, especially if you're talking about a red line station in the area, a high-speed rail station in the area, a light rail service coming in from Burbank, Glendale, Pasadena, is maybe having something like an automated people mover train. So that's what's shown, an example from actually New York on the upper right there. And you can see it has a pretty high capital cost, though, something like $750 million to put that in. And so what you really see is that probably doesn't make sense until you get a lot more of that service in the area, and that you need those really high-intensity connections to get people back and forth. As I talked about earlier, what the diagram on the right shows is just you have these 2 transit hubs on the north and south side of the airports, and the different services that you could have coming into them as part of the different alternatives. And you have some really great options, especially for alternatives 2, 3, and 4 coming into both of those hubs. And the final piece of our what we're looking at for improvements is focused on bicycles and pedestrians. And so there's already some great things planned as part of Burbank's general plan and is really part of a lot of focus on pedestrians and bicycles that's been happening in the LA area over the past 10 years. And really what it's about is making an easier first mile, last mile of your trip. So allowing you to connect from your transit station to your ultimate destination of an office or a house or something like that. So a couple things we're looking at. Gaurav already touched on them with improvements to the streetscape in the area that will be great for pedestrians. Another interesting concept is something called a mobility hub that the City of LA, Metro, and others have been looking at, which basically brings together bike share, secure bike parking, car shares like Zipcar or short-term car rentals into a single hub at something like a transit station. And what that really does is allows you to get to your final destination that maybe is outside of walking distance. And that's something, especially if you look at the land use when we have these areas that are beyond a 5 or 10 minute walk from the station, then maybe something like this mobility hub will allow you to make that last part of your trip more easily and encourage you to use transit, whereas maybe today you would think about using a car. So it's something that's already being planned for the North Hollywood station, and I think we'd look at also trying to integrate some of the elements of that at those transit hubs that we have on the north and south side of the airport as part of this study. And then a final piece which we show here is bike improvements. Class 1 is a bike path, Class 2 is bike lanes, and Class 3 is a bike route on streets. So there's already some great improvements that you can see shown here as part of the City of Burbank plans. One of them is a bike path along the railroad tracks along San Fernando Road there. And one other thing I'd like to note is that there's some green blocks along the different rail lines. That's where we're looking at possibly improving pedestrian and bicycle service across the tracks. Because while they are great transit connections long range down to Los Angeles or up to Palmdale, they also in the immediate area almost form as barriers that it's very difficult to get from North San Fernando Road to South San Fernando Road and vice versa. So looking at ways that we can possibly increase the connections across those railroad corridors. So for the immediate area, they don't act like barriers, they act like we want them to, which is great transit options for people coming to and from the area. So those are the 7 areas that we're looking at. We have a final board which just kind of sums up the four alternatives and the different options that are included there. And just one thing I'd like to highlight there is what we show in parentheses in the bottom right of each one of these boxes, which is the expected lead agency. A few of these improvements are something that the airport, say, directly would not do, or the city would not do. It would be instead something that, say, Metro would do, or some of these are the City of Burbank, or some of them are the airport, some of them are Metrolink and different operators like that. So this study very much is about how to go to those operators and talk to them about the improvements that we think will benefit the area. And so this kind of gives an idea of who they are and who the next steps really would be with as part of this study. So that is a rundown of our alternatives, of the effectiveness and the costs that we saw from them, and kind of what some of these next steps would be moving forward for these improvements. So that is the end of the presentation and the board's here, and we'd be happy to answer some questions about transportation improvements too.
David, forgive my ignorance on this. With the grade separations along San Fernando, I assume the bike path that's going there, that's been factored in, I hope. And then the new train station, at least in that representation, I couldn't distinguish a bike path, which, to my understanding, in light of everything that's been said, would be going right through it. Or maybe it's on the other side of the rails. How does that work its way in? Because that's a little worrisome. And finally, I thought that I was told that within my lifetime I shouldn't even dream about having any kind of rail connection from Burbank to Pasadena. So if that's even being talked about, I'm thrilled. And what kind of routing is envisioned for that?
Well, I will attempt to answer the first one as best I can, but David might actually have a better ability to do that. But yeah, there is basically a bike path being looked at along that entire corridor from basically Burbank all the way up to Sylmar, as far as I know, and the designs are trying to accommodate the bike path through those areas, both by the grade separation and by the station. The third one about the route to Burbank, Glendale, Pasadena, I would say this is one of the first steps of starting to talk about it, so it still is probably going to be a ways out, but you are starting to see that gain traction. Metro actually talked about it today as part of their planning and programming committee meeting, and it's an interesting concept. It's going to be a tough one to put in the near term just because there's not even really much bus service in that corridor right now, so that might be a good first step, and in fact, Metro is already looking at that as part of a BRT program. The route is still certainly up to study. What I'm going to try to go through here is just to show it to you in general, but what it basically looks at is going along the 134 kind of through the hill area between Pasadena and Glendale, and then once you get close to Highway 2, going more along Colorado over towards the Galleria, and then swinging up on either Brand or Central through downtown Glendale there, and then for the most part running up Glen Oaks or through downtown Burbank there and ending at the airport. But like I said, that's really kind of a first cut at it. It's going to take quite a few additional studies to better define what that connection could be.
I wasn't quite clear about the overpass off of the not San Fernando, but the Empire, the new over going to the airport. Is that going to connect with the new airport? You said there was a walking sidewalk or something after you get over the Empire into the parking lot, and then you get on a walking sidewalk to the terminal. Well, if they move the terminal over to the north side, how you have to get a shuttle bus to get over there? I mean, how is that working?
That's correct. So it provides a connection in the near term with the pedestrian bridge from the train station to the Ritzy, and then there's an existing moving walkway that takes you from there to the existing terminal. But if you do have a replacement terminal on the north side of the airport, that connection, instead of being a moving walkway, would be with a shuttle bus, most likely, or a people mover as part of the final alternative. Can everybody hear me when I'm talking without a microphone? Why don't we just keep the microphone with the audience then?
When is the new terminal going to come into effect? Has that been nailed down yet?
No, they're still just doing some initial environmental studies on that, and the time frame has not been nailed down to my knowledge. And
Although the San Fernando shuttle is going to Palmdale, is that going to go to downtown Burbank and on into Los Angeles?
that's correct. So
And you could get to Orange County and that rail and through there, but if you do it on Empire, you can go up the coast and up north Santa Barbara and there.
yes, let me show you on this map here. It's on the upper right. It's tough to see. The blue line is the one that runs from Ventura past the south side of the airport and then to downtown Los Angeles. The green line runs from Lancaster and Palmdale through the north side of the airport, and then they join right by Costco there and run on the same track to Union Station in downtown Los Angeles.
So how can you find out when you call up on, when you get it on the computer as to whether they're going to stop at the downtown one or which one? Will they show the same timeline or? It's very confusing because the first time I tried to get it up on the internet and see the times and the running and so on and so forth, it was very confusing. So you get down to the to make your ticket, to get your ticket, if you don't get it online, it's got so much stuff to poke this, poke that. It's confusing.
Yeah,
But they
okay.
don't have anybody manned down there to help you in any of them.
So that's part of the reason why we're looking to improve those platform areas to make it an easier ridership experience of being able to take the train there. One of the things that we are looking at as part of what we show on the bottom there is, at least if you're at the airport area, to provide signage, changeable signage that tells you, should you be going to the station on the south side of the airport or the station on the north side of the airport if you want to be able to catch the next train, say, to downtown Los Angeles. We had been looking at some improvements also as part of our study of trying to provide better signage on the rest of the system to know how to get to the airport. So for example, if there's a train, say you're at Union Station, you want to try to get to the airport, the train would have a plane sign next to it, so you know this is the train I want to get on if I'm going to Burbank Airport. So we're definitely trying to make that an easier experience, especially since if you're talking about airport passengers, a lot of them may be from out of town or not as familiar with the area, so we want to make it as easy as possible for them to ride the train.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You mentioned about the overpass on Buena Vista. Where does it land, and where did it start on the new train, and where is it going to land? And also my concerns is the noise. When you have overpass, what happened with the noise?
The overpass starts towards the south, basically by Costco. Am I correct, David? On the south end?
Just north of the animal shelter.
Okay, so yeah, just north of the animal shelter there on the south end. It goes up, it goes over Empire Avenue. It's going to go over Buena Vista and then come back down to the existing ground level just south of Hollywood Way. So that's kind of the extent of how it goes up and down over those streets there. When it comes to sound or noise, I don't think I can answer that question, but it's something that was looked at as part of that project, and I'm sorry, but I don't have the answers for that question.
Sam Almadine, what you showed us here is very exciting, visioning from land use to transportation for 20, 30 years ahead, and you showed a lot of stuff, especially on the transportation. And specifically because of that, I strongly recommend to include the high-speed rail now and before you close this phase, because that work is in the environmental phase right now. So way ahead of a lot of what we've seen here. So that's my comment.
Okay. Thank you. And yeah, we're trying, as we find out more information about that high-speed rail station, to integrate it as best we can into our study.
Your last answer prompted this, because I hadn't realized that the overpass was just going to start once, not an up and down, up and down. What's foreseen for what will be under that rail? Is it something parkish, or do we know? Has it been discussed? And if not, I hope it's parkish.
It's basically going to be up. It's not going to be up on a bridge the entire way. It'll be on bridges over Empire and over Empire, but I'm sorry, over Buena Vista. But in between, it's basically going to be up on a fill structure with retaining walls, I believe, on either side. So directly under the tracks, it's going to be filled in with earth, basically. And then, like we talked about, there's also the bike path on one side or the other. But yeah, it's only going to be up with something underneath it in those two areas where it goes over the streets.
The San Fernando bike path would be grade separated over Empire using the Victory Place overpass, which is also going to go over Empire. But at Buena Vista, there'll be an at-grade crossing crosswalk with a signal.
So far, I like all the proposals for like the buses, the trains, the bike paths, all this stuff. But I guess the one thing that a lot of residents are going to be talking about is trying to deal with traffic situation on our streets. Now, right now, just currently with Hollywood Way and Buena Vista are having the most backup traffic that I haven't seen. I haven't seen that in many years. Along with this study and all these proposals, are you guys going to be looking into realigning any of these, like Hollywood Way or any of the streets that are between Hollywood Way and Buena Vista, to try to improve traffic flow to the airport and to the freeway?
I don't think as part of this study we're looking at any major realignments of streets. I think a good guiding philosophy is from the Burbank General Plan, which says that for the most part the street system in Burbank is pretty built out. And so we're looking more at spot improvements than really major, say, new streets or things like that. I think the intention we're trying to do is with these transit options to give people the opportunity to not drive and to hopefully have that affect how many cars are on the road in some way.
I'm just looking at the grid, and I'm seeing that some of the options, let's say the 7 options, some of them are the same across the board, and some of them differ fairly radically. I'm wondering if there's kind of a mission statement in back of this that would make sense to me in interpreting all these things, thinking of them more holistically. Also, if you considered other kind of air transportation hubs and how this would, as competitors, as interplay, whatever. So just to kind of put some into perspective.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just talk about the first point that you had. I think our endpoint in the study is a little bit different than the land use side of things. We're not necessarily looking for a preferred alternative to go through and to pick, one column here. It's much more seen as an implementation plan of here's what we can do in the near term with some fairly cheap bus options, and they're not that cheap, but less expensive. And then as we build up the ridership to go to these bigger improvements over time, more towards rail or something like that. Some of them, for example, for streets, we're not looking at as many improvements as part of that piece of it. So they are pretty standard across the four alternatives, whereas for other ones, like say the connection to Burbank, Glendale, Pasadena, that does have some significant changes as you go further up there. So you're right, it's a mix of some of them where it's fairly standard and some of them where there is more. And we're looking at how we can blend that into the best approach in the different timeframes we're dealing with. On the second point, we did not look specifically at connections to other airports as part of this study, but it's something that has been a priority of Metro over the past year or so. They've been looking at regional airport connectivity, and not just Bob Hope, but LAX and Ontario and Palmdale and the rest of them around the region.
Hi, Paul Dyson. Just a comment on the current traffic issues and congestion. It's a matter of great concern, I think, as a member of the Transportation Commission, that Metrolink ridership is down. And I think that's a combination of some service issues, and also they keep putting the fares up. And so people are finding it better to switch back to using their cars, and that has a direct impact on the amount of traffic on Buena Vista and Hollywood Way. The other point I'd like to make is that your Transportation Commission meets on the third Monday of every month here in this building at 5 p.m. And if you're interested in these issues, this coming Monday we'll have the representative from the High Speed Rail Authority giving us an update. There have been some recent announcements about possible changes in the priorities of construction. So if you're interested in that and these transit issues in general, we're members of the public are always very welcome to attend. 5 p.m. on the third Monday here in this building. Thanks.
Sorry, I'm not noted for my shyness. I heard a chuckle back there. It's interesting what Paul just said. The sense that I got after listening to all this is that appropriately we're addressing largely regional transportation issues as ties in with the airport and the 540 acres. I think somewhere more attention needs to be paid to the perspective of folks in town, to exactly what Paul said, traffic, because with this, I suspect that at best, response will be neutral, and that there might be resistance because of fears of increased traffic. So somewhere along the line, as these things get funded, some ancillary funding might be worth pursuing to get better service on the Burbank bus, which we had to cancel one of the routes, and I don't think it's come back, whenever that was, when I was on the transit task force 2-3 years ago. These kinds of things somehow get funding so that people in town will be encouraged to have no gap service to get from the hillside to somewhere on the west side of town and so forth. That ties in with all this. That might make it a more interesting, appealing, and supportable program or assemblage of projects.
And yeah, one comment to that is that I think a lot of these near-term things that we're seeing, the attempt is, as part of that mitigation plan for the Interstate 5 construction, to address them with something like extended Burbank bus hours. And one of the hopes is that when that happens, people may use it in the interim to deal with the impacts of the Interstate 5 project, but then realize that it's easy even without the 5 construction, that we can hopefully keep some of them once the construction is done, say on riding Burbank bus. So we see that as an opportunity, that mitigation plan, to help expand things like that in the long term, not just in the near term.
Okay, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I think we're at the point in the workshop where we go back to the open house format. Is that correct, Gaurav? Okay, so if there are any questions, we're all going to be here for a little while. We'll stay as long as there are questions. We'll be standing on either side, so if you have questions about transportation, all the slides you saw are actually here. You can get up close to them if they were difficult for you to see and ask some questions. There are, excuse me, some Post-it notes and pens and things. You can write notes, leave comments on the boards that we can incorporate into the larger comment boards. We probably won't pick up the mic again this evening, so I wanted to thank you all very much for coming. It's very much appreciated. It's good to see familiar faces and some people we haven't seen in this process. But this isn't the end. This is the last workshop for this phase, so keep looking at linkburbank.com occasionally. We recently submitted, or yesterday, in fact, we submitted an application for grant funding from Metro to continue the next phase of this and develop the specific plan and do the environmental impact report for the area. So we'll find out about that this fall, and then we'll be able to pick up the process again after that. So again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you all being here. Thank you.